Coming up, artists and the economy. A new center opens to support Oglala Lakota creatives. Plus, the road to the 2024 Republican National Convention is shaping up with a list of presidential hopefuls. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We begin today in Oklahoma, where the state's high court will decide whether or not Native Americans are exempt from taxes. Muskogee Creek citizen Alicia Strobel is arguing that she is immune from paying state income taxes under federal law. On the contrary, the state's tax commission says every person should be required to pay their fair share of income taxes. Strobel has cited the recent case before the U.S. Supreme Court called McGirt versus Oklahoma, saying that decision protects her in this situation because she lives and works on the tribal lands of the Muskogee Creek. Several tribes have filed amicus briefs in support of Strobel. That includes the Cherokee Nation, with Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. saying his nation is ready to, quote, defend tribal sovereignty anywhere it is threatened. It is a common misconception that Native Americans do not pay taxes. They pay both state and federal taxes regardless of their dual citizenship. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt weighed in, saying the state would lose an estimated $75 million in revenue if the courts decide tribal citizens didn't have to pay state taxes. The Oklahoma Supreme Court has not yet set a date for oral arguments. A newly released study doesn't indicate great news for Indigenous women. According to a recent American Heart Association report, more than 60% of American Indian and Alaska Native women of childbearing age have suboptimal heart health due to social factors. This means before entering pregnancy, factors such as exposure to violence and childhood trauma contribute to higher risks of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of pregnancy-related death in the U.S. and the second leading cause of death for Indigenous women in the country. The report recommends creating a support system that acknowledges the detrimental impact of colonization, exploitation, and racism on the health of Native people. This is the first time the American Heart Association has addressed the topic of maternal health for American Indian and Alaska Native women in a scientific statement. Some municipalities and states in the U.S. have begun to adopt an Indigenous Peoples Day as a holiday, the latest being in Medway, Massachusetts. On May 8th, the town met and voted to recognize the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day rather than Columbus Day. Nipik citizen and lifelong resident Brittany Wally says it goes beyond an effort that she and a handful of others started during the summer of 2020. She says she is excited to see if the town is interested in building partnerships with the tribes in the region. Medway joins others, including states like Alaska, Vermont, and South Dakota, among others, in celebrating the holiday. Well, pay attention the next time you get some coins, because a Hawaiian woman is one of the latest to grace U.S. currency. Edith Kanakaole is the first Native Hawaiian woman to be featured on a U.S. quarter. She is being recognized as part of the American Women Quarters program, which honors women who have shaped history. In the 1970s and beyond, Kanakaole was a pivotal figure to revive Hawaiian language and culture, including traditional chants and hula dances. Kanakaole was known in the community as Auntie Edith and was celebrated last month at the quarter's release in Hilo, Hawaii in May. The coin image was inspired by a 1977 photo of her wearing a lei po'o, also known as a head lei. The U.S. Mint began issuing the new quarters earlier this year. In Portland, Oregon, LGBTQ students enjoyed their first queer prom since 2019. The Native American Youth and Family Center, better known as NAYA, held its annual dance at the Portland Art Museum. About 300 students attended, wearing whatever made them feel most comfortable, from ball gowns and suits to elf ears and fairy wings. The event hosted live entertainment, including native drag performers Carla Rossi and Gila Suspectum. Their performances were met with cheers and applause from the audience, some of which were seeing live drag for the first time. Rossi and Suspectum encouraged the crowd to learn more about the Two-Spirit identity and its importance within their own tribes, saying it plays an important role in combating homophobia across Native lands. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast.
Seven generations ago, you were already imagined. Your place in this universe was already foreseen. Across those generations, the message has come unchanged. Your time here is sacred. Your life is the legacy of those who came before. Your spirit is strong because they were strong. Your presence is proof of that. You are on the path of 7 generations past and 7 yet to come. Your spirit has seen truth and consequence. It has seen the light of life's joy and the weight of its pain. Sometimes that weight is heavy. Sometimes that weight is more than one can bear alone. But you are not alone. Of that I am sure. If you are contemplating suicide or know someone who is, know that you are not alone. Reach out. There is help. There is someone to talk to.
To talk to someone or to help someone you know, call or live chat the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Call 1-800-273-TALK.
First Peoples Fund invests in the creative spirit of Indigenous artists and culture bearers. That came together during the grand opening of the Oglala Lakota Artspace last month, which brought the community together in Kyle, South Dakota. The space features studios for artists, crafts, and musicians. Lori Pourier is president and CEO of First Peoples Fund. ICT Shirley Snavy asked her to reflect on her career and impact.
I've been doing this work my whole life. With First Peoples Fund, I joined First Peoples Fund in 1998, and First Peoples Fund was founded by a woman named Jennifer Easton, who had a donor-advised fund at the Tides Foundation in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she was trying to do micro-lending in Indian country, and it was really hard to, be based in San Francisco with a non-native person, leading the work in an institution that didn't know Indian country. And so they were making loans and they weren't being paid off. So I had met Kalima Rose, who was a part of some earlier work I did with the Indigenous Women's Network and was at the Tides Foundation as well. And so they brought me on, knowing my work with, earlier work with First Nations Development Institute and the Indigenous Women's Network. So that's how this work came to be. So I always say that the work extends before First Peoples Fund, because First Nations and our work there with Rebecca Adamson and Sherry Salway Black and Elsie Meeks and others, Gerald Sherman, we launched the Lakota funds here on Pine Ridge. And during that time, my Uncle Richard did a research study through the Aspen Institute, and it was around the flow of funds and how money's distributed in local economies. And at that time, and it must have been probably 87 or so, 97 cents of the dollar was being circulated outside of this local economy. And so Lakota Funds was born, and really making loans to artists. So my grandma, Olivia Blackout Pourier, was one of the first ones to get a loan from the Lakota Funds in making quilts, and to sell those quilts throughout the reservation, to make quilts for graduation and other things. And as I said, 97 cents of that dollar was circulating outside of the local economy. And the major form of commerce here in the community was the government sector, right? So that's why Lakota Funds was born here on Pine Ridge, to just help build business. And Ivan Sorbo from the Pine Ridge Area Chamber of Commerce, who we've also been working with for a very long time, he said there was over 700 and some businesses now here, I believe, on Pine Ridge. So, that trajectory is a contribution of everybody, right, in terms of even the trajectory of the work with First Peoples Fund. So we had enough data, in advance to know why we should do the work we're doing at First Peoples Fund. So when we started First Peoples Fund in 1998, 1999, we convened not only artists, but we also brought in Lakota Funds, the other CDFIs. Eloise Cabal was involved with the earlier work, Elsie Meeks and others. And, because we knew that we wanted to also utilize their services, those informal networks and those networks that existed that would help businesses. So somewhere around 2011, we did our own research, and we partnered with a national organization called Artspace out of Minneapolis, and Kelly Lindquist was the founder of Artspace, one of the founders, and they had spaces all over the country. So we knew in our own research on the creative economy that there were specific needs for artists, because we did deep research all across this reservation and trying to figure out how to support artists as entrepreneurs. And we knew from that research that 51% of the households were engaged in some sort of home-based practice. And that was an extension from that earlier report I mentioned. It was a very active informal sector economy, they used to call it. And so, but from that 51%, 79% of those were engaged in some sort of tradition-based practice. So, mentioning my grandma, Olivia Blackout, she was a quilter. And she was busy all time, all the way right up to graduation, right? We all have the grandmas, the aunties, and all of them that make the quilts for the community, so everybody can have their quilts for graduation. And so we also knew that later research that we did, that 40%, of those households in this economy were actually traditional artists. And so we really wanted to support community-based artists and helping them grow their business. And we started to do that work, and we've done it here since. And there were about 6 areas of needs in our surveys and interviewing artists. So it was access to informal networks, it was access to supplies, access to capital, and materials. I mean, there was six different areas of support, but the distribution networks that support artists to do business. And we also knew that the CDFIs didn't have that knowledge of the distribution networks that support artists. So we needed other artists to teach emerging artists in communities like Pine Ridge, to be their mentors, like Donald Montello, who we honor today and recognize today, and Richard Red Owl and others. We needed them to mentor the young folks, because we also saw at the time many of those mentors now today that are elderly, they were the ones that were relocating and moving to the Southwest to make a living from their art. And so that's when we said we need to identify those that have moved away to come home, not come home, but, be mentors, because they had been, have family now in the Southwest and all of that. So Don Montello and Linda Zabel and Paul Zabel and others have contributed heavily to coaching and mentoring and working with the young artists. So we did that work for many years. And then we also have a national fellowship program, in supporting artists as leaders, business leaders. And so then came the building in probably about 2013, right after the study. We really started to look at that area of space and how do we identify and support artists in this community, because we were hearing that they needed everyone was kind of, that were practicing artists. Of that 41%, we all have those aunties and uncles, and you eat your dinner, make your dinner, and then you got to finish that beadwork, that quill work, the quilt, and so then everybody cleans off the kitchen table, and then you're visiting with family, right, making and creating till midnight or whatever to get ready for the show or to get ready for the tribe to purchase some art or whatever. So that's how we focused on the Oglala Lakota Artspace. Our dreams are actualizing right now. Our dreams are beginning to actualize, and you can see it today here in the space. People from all over the res community of artists, the young people are in charge of this building, the poets, the spoken word poets. Young Autumn White Eyes, who grew up in our program as a high school student, now leads that work. And so we have active poetry writing here. We have the Dances with Words program, of which the young people named. We have studio spaces for artists, so the hip hop artists are coming in. And these are often the young folks that are the creatives, in tribal community, but don't always have the same resources. They're not the basketball players, they're not in that trajectory. They're the ones that your spirits need to be fulfilled just by creating art. So that's what the dream is here for Oglala Lakota Artspace. So those next generation, we honored Richard and Donald today, and Cecilia Fire Thunder and others, and that's what Richard said. Red Owl, we need to step back because the young ones now are leading, and you can see it. All of them out here today at the Oglala Lakota Artspace. They're all creating, making, and selling work much different than we saw 23 years ago now, because they're all doing it online. They're all staying home in community and marketing and selling and distributing their work through social media and other ways. So we give them the space to not only create here, but to access all those other areas of needs for artists.
That was Lori Pourier. More and more Republican candidates are announcing their run for presidency in the 2024 election. It means a long campaign season ahead of next year's Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Here to talk more about this is ICT's regular contributor, John Tahsuda. Welcome back, John.
Thanks.
Former Vice President Mike Pence was the latest to announce a bid for the Republican nomination. What is his track record in Native communities?
Well, so Mr. Pence didn't have much of a track record before. Remember, he was from the state of Indiana, which has obviously old history with tribes, et cetera. But, in sort of the 20th century, wasn't a lot of history there. So there's been some tribal move back, but and generally speaking, it's not been a significant part of the recent state history. So he didn't have a lot of history there himself. But I would say had the opportunity to work with him when he was the vice president. He was very supportive of all the things that we were trying to do in Indian country. He understood the economic plight, the social plight, and so was very supportive of economic endeavors, social endeavors, and important things that we often forget about when we're talking big picture politics, but on the ground. Things that really affect people's lives. So obtaining housing more efficient, removing other barriers to social development. Very interested in those. So I found him great to work with, very interested and very open-minded. So I think based on that, if he were, he's a long shot, right? But if he were to become president, I think he would be a great president to work with Indian country.
We know that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is also a presidential hopeful. Can you tell us about some of the things that he's done for the tribes in his state?
So, again, not a long history until he became governor, but I think it's difficult. People often get caught looking through the lens of gaming. Obviously, the Seminole tribe in Florida has a large gaming business. Both Indian gaming and non-Indian gaming through their Hard Rock enterprise. So, a lot of the news from Indian country in Florida has been through that lens, dealing with the compacts and the negotiations that they've had. But, it would seem, from my understanding, that he's worked really well with the tribes. He's been very open to their partnership. And I would actually call it a partnership there in the state. the ability of the tribe to really push economic development that benefits both the tribe and the state. I think he recognized that, and so has been supportive, it seems like, from day one when he became governor. So, you know, a little bit of background in Indian country is always helpful when the guy becomes president. And so if he were to become president, I would think that there would be a good opportunity for Indian country to have working space, not having to start from ground zero, but and hopefully some of the people that would come with him would have some of that background and experience. And so we could hit the ground running for Indian country if he were to become president.
We know that former President Donald Trump is also running for another White House run, and he appears to be the front runner for that race. What were some of the wins, in your opinion, for Indian country under President Trump's administration?
So I think that some of the important wins had to deal with in energy development, and I would say not just sort of classic energy. There was a lot of focus on that, as you recall, during the Trump administration to sort of make the nation energy independent. But in truth, there was sort of an all the above approach, and particularly for Indian country. So while there certainly was an advantage to the tribes who have traditional energy resources, there was a lot of effort put into starting the groundwork on things that are needed for a new energy economy. So infrastructure for transmission of energy, these issues I think were very important, and you know, sort of started the groundwork. Those will be long-term investments by this nation, and on behalf of Indian country, long-term investments. It will take years and years to get there, and successive administrations. But I think the groundwork was laid there. So I think that was an important component. I would also say, particularly in the West, you know, there remains this big water issue, but certainly the notion that Indian country had a large role to play in it, had a great deal of support in Mr. Trump's administration, trying to find solutions that worked for everybody, including the tribes, and recognition that the tribes, through the water settlements that they had and through future water settlements, could really complement what the federal government tried to do in solving water problems for everybody in the West.
It appears that President Trump could be, of the candidates that we just mentioned, one of the only candidates who has a history of making decisions in Indian country. On the flip side, what would you say some of Mr. Trump's biggest losses were for Native people?
I'm not sure. I think that, well, I guess the question would be the perspective of losses, perspective where things were not accomplished for Indian country. You know, I think that there was some challenges faced in getting across complementary ideas around things like shrinking national monuments, and some misperceptions that unfortunately caught up in the politics of those, you know, allowed detractors on both sides to criticize the administration, those who think they didn't go far enough, those that thought they went way too far. And in the reality for the folks in the administration dealing with things such as national monuments, park service, et cetera, those are real challenges on the resources side, the budget resources side, how to deal with those, how to protect the lands that are set aside, and if you can't, are there other ways to do it? And you know, those things they're difficult to explain in a political environment, difficult to explain simply in that kind of a discourse that's needed. But I think that one opportunity that was pushed forward but didn't get a chance to really bloom, maybe would in a second term for him, was the notion of giving the tribes a lot more opportunity to contract for nearby federal lands, whether they're BLM, whether they're forest lands, but to have a role in managing those so that it benefits not just those public lands, but it benefits the Indian lands that are next to them. I think that's really something that would be a great space for tribes to be able to push forward in a second term with Mr. Trump.
John, among the circles of Native American Republicans that you know and speak to, who appears to be the favorite for the Republican nomination, and what do those conversations look like, given that there are now so many options?
I don't think there's a front runner. I think people perceive there to be positives amongst a number of them. And there are folks that we didn't talk about earlier, but have some good history with Indian country as well, such as Nikki Haley out of South Carolina. She's been a big supporter of the Catawba Nation there, and a great friend of them over the years. So, you know, again, not a long history in Indian country, but a positive one. So I think right now there's just too many out there, to really draw a front runner. I think that the hope would be that the issues that are important in any country would be something that all the candidates, whoever rises to the top, would be willing to be open-minded about and seek solutions for.
I do want to talk about the fact that you're in Minnesota right now for the mid-year conference of the National Congress of American Indians. What's the atmosphere like there?
Well, first off, let's say it's a great time of year to be in Minnesota. The weather's beautiful outside, and we're here at Mystic Hotel and Resort and Casino, owned by the Shakopee Nation, and it's a beautiful property, great space to meet in. So it seems to me like, as there is usually, a lot of tribal leaders are here. There's important things to discuss. They have, though, a very large convention space, which should kind of make the meeting seem smaller, almost like a restaurant that's too big. And even though you have a lot of people sitting at tables, it seems like it's not quite full. So I think it makes it look like, just because the space is really probably made for larger conventions, that there are not that many there. But it looks, I've seen a number of tribal leaders. I think folks are here to try to get on the table issues. As you know, oftentimes the mid-year sort of sets the table for the annual conference at the end of the year. And so I think that's partly what they're looking forward to.
Well, ICT regular contributor John Tahsuda, thank you as always.
Thank you very much.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.